Well, welcome to our Next Generation service, everybody. Our long weekend, first long weekend in September, we always do our Next Generation service, and here we are. You've made it. Congratulations. I'm excited to share with you this morning. A couple weeks ago, Pastor Simon shared about how we grew up together. We met in kindergarten, and we grew up, and we played basketball together throughout high school, and he kind of bragged about me a little bit, and he told everyone how good I was at basketball. How good I am at basketball, I shouldn't say that. How good I am at basketball, and which, is, I don't want to humble brag, but it's true. And but what he didn't tell you is it took me a while to get good at basketball. Now, this picture behind us, that's a picture of us sitting on the bench in grade 8. All right, that's what we looked like in grade 8 together. And back in grade 8, I wasn't very good at basketball. I was a little bit of a late bloomer. So grade 8, I wasn't as good as I probably should have been. And so I remember one day there was a game, and my coach put me in at the end of the game, towards the end of the game, where it didn't really matter. The score didn't really matter. He put me on just to, give me a bit of playing time, and I didn't really know what I was doing. You kind of run around, and, you just pretend like you're kind of busy and stuff, and make sure you don't mess it up. And we were on offense, and we were trying to score the ball, and I was standing, outside of the three-point line. That's pretty far. And all of a sudden, the ball came to me. And I was like, what is this? That never happened. And I was so far, and I panicked. I didn't know what to do. And I just launched the ball up in the air. And at that moment, it was like a movie scene. That movie scene when everything starts to go in slow motion. And I could see the ball, I was like, whoo, and the ball was like, you can see the rotation of the ball. And my friends were like, watching to see what's going to happen. And I'm looking, and all of a sudden, the ball goes in the hoop. And I was as surprised as anybody. And my friends, they're all jumping for joy. They're high-fiving me. The other team calls a timeout, and everyone swarms me. And it was like that point of a movie where the chubby kid that's not really good at anything does something awesome. It was that moment. I lived that moment. And the moment that I remember is walking back to the bench, and I'll never forget the look on my coach's face, the smile that he had, just his eyes, he was just so proud of me. And I'll never forget what he said. He came up to me, gave me a big hug, gave me a high five, and he said, "Lewis, that was an amazing shot. Great job, buddy." Then he goes, "Downtown Charlie Brown." I don't even really know what that meant, but it sounded awesome. And I said, "Thank you." And I'll never forget just that look, the smile, the affirmation that he gave me. My confidence in that moment, I felt like I was on top of the earth, on top of the world. I felt like I could accomplish anything in that moment. And it just took that one simple encouragement that my coach didn't even realize that he did. He was just being normal. That's just how he acted. That one sentence, "Good job, buddy, downtown Charlie Brown." Took that one sentence, and it was a defining moment for me. As I look back on my life, there's a few defining moments that you remember, and that, funny enough, was one of them. My coach didn't even realize what he said to me at the time, but the domino effect of that moment was incredible. When I look back, I wasn't very good in grade 8, but that event, that comment spurred me to continue playing basketball throughout high school. And I continued to play throughout high school, and Simon and I, we were taking it to other teams, and it was awesome. And then I graduated, and I even to this day play in a Filipino basketball league. All the Filipinos out there playing basketball, where are you? I know you're out there. It's awesome. And so, and I've been coaching basketball almost every year since I've graduated high school for 13-ish years. And through the coaching of basketball, I feel like that's something that God's kind of called me to do, be in the high schools. I've been able to use that as an outreach. And I've seen, through church, we've seen people come to church for the very first time through that ministry. We've seen people give their hearts to Christ for the first time through that. We've seen people baptized through that. And it all started, the domino effect started on that one day when my coach looked at me and he spoke life to me on that day when I was in grade 8. Brennan Manning, he's a Christian author, and he wrote the book Ragamuffin Gospel. He says this, it's not on the screen, it's on your outline at the top of it. It says, in every encounter, we either give life or drain it. There's no neutral exchange. He says, in every encounter, we either give life or we drain it. There is no neutral exchange. Now, I always thought, when I go to Superstore, and I go shopping, a lot of times I don't feel like, talking to people, and I'm kind of walking with my head down, not making eye contact, and, I go and pay for my groceries, and, I'm not smiling, like I'm not ruining the person's day, but I'm not making that person's day either, and I'm just kind of like, just keeping to myself. I always thought, there was like this neutral area where it's like, this is a neutral exchange. Brandon Manning says, no, there is no neutral exchange. You either give life or you drain it. So if I asked you to think of a conversation that has given you life, what conversation do you think of? Who has given you an encouraging or empowering word that has shaped the course of your life? Maybe it was from a coach or a pastor, or maybe a friend, or maybe you're one of your parents. Maybe your mind goes back to middle school when you handed in an assignment, and you'll never forget those words that your teacher said to you back in middle school. Tommy, you are an amazing writer. And you ended up pursuing a career in journalism and writing because of that compliment, because it was so empowering for you. Maybe your mind goes back to high school where a youth pastor sat you down, and he or she sat down and looked at you and said, I see a call of God on your life. And from that, you ended up pursuing ministry. Or maybe your mind goes back to the first years of your career where your boss told you the words that will never leave your mind. He sat you down and he said, man, you are really gifted at sales. And you use that as a launching pad for your career. When you look back on your life, what conversations have impacted and empowered your life? What words have shaped the way that you think? What life-giving conversations stand out in your mind that have shaped your life? Words are powerful, aren't they? Words can shape the way we think. Words can stick with us for the rest of our lives. As your outline says, your words have the power to build up or tear down a life. Your words have the power to build up or tear down a life. In the book of James, chapter 3, James gives us a big warning about how much power our tongue really has. And there's lots of word pictures and images in this passage that he tries to paint in our mind. He says this, James chapter 3, verse 2, he says, indeed, we all make many mistakes. For if we can control our tongues, we would be perfect and could also control ourselves in every other way. We can make a large horse go wherever we want by means of a small bit in its mouth. And a small rudder makes a huge ship turn wherever the pilot chooses to go, even though the winds are strong. In the same way, the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And among all the parts of the body, the tongue is a flame of fire. It's a whole world of wickedness corrupting your entire body, and it can set your whole life on fire, for it is set on fire by hell itself. And James paints this picture. He says, your tongue, if you can control your tongue, it's the hardest part of your body that you're going to be able to control, the hardest part of your life. If you can control your tongue, you're going to be an A-plus Christian. And he paints a couple pictures. He said, picture a horse. In the mouth of a horse, there's a 1 pound bit that goes into a horse that's several hundred pounds. And from that 1 pound bit, you can control where the horse goes. And he says, look at a big ship, thousands and thousands of pounds, but it's controlled by one small rudder. And then he gets us to picture a forest fire. Now, you don't have to go very far to know the damage that a forest fire can do. We see what happens every year, what seems to be every year in the interior of BC. But I was doing some research on this, and in 2003, on a hot and dry day, this man named Michael Berry, he had a cigarette, and he threw it outside his window in the interior of BC. And they traced a forest fire back to that one cigarette butt that was thrown outside that day. And from that one cigarette, 75 homes were completely destroyed. 3,000 people were evacuated, and millions of dollars were given to contain that fire. When this incident happened back in 2003, that one small cigarette, that one small spark led to the province's worst forest fire up until that point in 50 years. And this is the point that James is trying to make. He says, listen, your tongue is small, but man, it is powerful. Your words are powerful, and they have the ability to tear down or to build up, to harm or to encourage. Your words have the ability to bring confusion or bring clarity, to wound or to heal, to drain life or to give life. And you know, when you read the Bible says that our words are actually a reflection of our soul. The way we use our words, the things that come out of our mouth, actually say a lot about who we are. In Luke chapter 6, verse 45, it's not on the screens, you can read it on your own. It talks about out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. So I want to ask you this morning, what's the overflow of your heart? Do you build up or do you tear down? In your conversations, think about your conversations in daily life. Do you give life or do you drain life? A few weeks ago, we went to the Cultus Lake water slides with our young adults, and it brought back memories of when I went down the 72-foot drop for the very first time. Anyone ever been on the 72-foot drop? Yeah, a couple of you guys. Okay. I remember the very first time that I went on this 72-foot drop, you sit on the top and they tell you, okay, cross your hands and cross your feet and stay like that the whole time. Just ride the slide all the way down. I said, okay, I got this. And so I was sitting on the top, I was like this, and as soon as my back went over the edge, there was like a split second where your back kind of comes off just a little bit, and I thought I was going to fall to my death that day. So instead of holding on like this, I clung for dear life. I went, ah! And I grabbed onto all sides of the slide all the way down the 72-foot drop. Boom, boom, boom. It seemed like an eternity, all right? It was the worst, 4 seconds of my life. And I'm not even joking you, it took me 10 minutes to take out my wedgie that day. It was absolutely horrible. I know you probably didn't want to hear that, but let's just be honest here. But that moment my legs went over that edge, it was like the point of no return. I couldn't take back my decision to go to do that water slide. I was fully committed whether I liked it or not. And that same way, when you say a word, when you verbalize a word, when that word leaves your lips, there's no taking it back. The damage is done, just like that. As your outline says, it takes years to encourage someone, but just seconds to ruin them. It takes years to encourage someone, but just seconds to ruin them. I can encourage my 4-year-old son every single day of his life until he's 13 years old. For the next 11 years, I could encourage him, tell him how good he is, tell him how proud I am of him, tell him all the great things about him. But it only takes 1 second when he's 13, in a moment when I'm frustrated, in a moment when I'm angry, in a moment when my mind's not all there, to turn to him and say, Max, you'll never amount to anything. It only takes 1 second of me not thinking properly, and that one sentence could affect him for the rest of his life. See, it takes years to encourage someone, but just seconds to ruin them. What conversations or words were said to you that you still have going through your mind that have changed the trajectory of your life in a negative way? Maybe words like, you're not good enough, you'll never amount to anything, you're fat, you're ugly, you're a loser, you're not lovable, you're not smart enough, you can't. Words like, you'll never be able to, or you'll never get past this. Maybe it was a word that was simply like a comment in passing, said to you as a comment in passing. Maybe it was a joke that was made about you. Or maybe, just maybe, it was from a parent that should have known better. I'm sure you can remember those words that have torn you down, those words that have inflicted harm on your self-image, those words that have set you down a path of insecurity, those words that you just can't seem to get out of your mind. You see, we were all born with this very powerful weapon in our mouths called the tongue, and it has the ability to build up lives or to destroy lives. The logical question now is, how do I harness this power? I don't know if you're an X-Men fan, but it's an American superhero film series that's come out, and they have a number of movies, and there's a bunch of characters up here. We have Wolverine, and he has superhuman strength and can heal very quickly. And he has, of course, the claws that come out. You have Professor X, who can read and control people's minds. You have Rogue. She can absorb the power and memory of any person just by touching their skin, just by having skin-to-skin contact. You have Storm. She can control the weather. You have Pyro. He can manipulate fire. And so in the X-Men movies, in the first movie, we see these characters as normal kids, but they don't understand the extent of the power that they have. They know they're special, and they try to live normal lives, but they just can't. Their powers keep getting in the way. One day, Rogue, there's this boy that she likes. She's a teenager, there's a boy that she likes, and she touches his hands. And all of a sudden, she almost kills him because she was starting to suck off the memory and the power from him, because that's her special power. One day, Pyro, he gets into a bit of a fight, and he almost lights a whole community on fire because he's shooting fireballs everywhere. Each of these characters, they were born with a superpower, and they were all invited to this school for gifted youngsters. Okay, they all had these powers. They came to the school of gifted youngsters in order to learn how to harness these powers and use them for good. What are we supposed to do with the power that we possess in our tongue? How are we supposed to train it? How are we supposed to guide it? How are we supposed to use it for good? How are we supposed to harness it? Well, Scripture gives us a little insight about this. There's not like a 5-step process in what to do, but Scripture kind of sets the bar for us in regards to our tongues. The Apostle Paul says in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29, he says this: do not let any, everyone say any, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. The word unwholesome literally means rotten or foul. The Apostle Paul is saying, as your outline says, when you want to say something unwholesome, rotten, or foul, stop yourself. Just stop yourself. He says, don't let any, zero, nada, zilch, don't let not even one unwholesome word come out of your mouth. Stop yourself before that comes out. So when that nasty, foul word comes into your mind, you begin to form into a sentence, and it's about to come out of your mouth, you need to hit the brakes. You need to put a sock in your mouth. Whatever you do, whatever you got to do, do not say that word. Because as soon as that word comes out of your mouth, you can't get it back. You can't get it back. I don't know if you've ever done this before. I've done it a few times. But when you're putting toothpaste on your toothbrush, sometimes you squeeze just a little bit too much. And it's all over your counter and stuff. And you're like, oh, shoot, what am I? And you try to put it back in, and it just doesn't work. I remember the first time my kids got a hold of one of these, okay? It was they thought they were ninjas, shooting things at each other and just spraying it everywhere. And I'm like, what are you doing? And, you try to put it back inside, but it doesn't work. As soon as toothpaste is outside of its tube, trust me, it is not going back in the tube. That same way, as soon as a word comes out of your mouth, you can never get it back. It's said, it is out there. And that foul, unwholesome word that you maybe even meant nothing by, that word that just came out in a moment of anger or frustration, it can change a person's life forever. In our parenting course that we did last year or earlier this year with Dr. Dave Curry, he was talking about situations where parents in the house where you get angry and tensions are high and you're about to explode. All the parents know what I'm talking about, all right? I'll never forget what he said. He said, in that moment, force yourself to walk away. He said, go to your room, yell in your pillow, go to the garage, bang a nail in a 2x4. Whatever you do, stop yourself, because whatever you say in that moment will not be worth it. It won't be worth it. And that's what Paul is saying. He says, don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. Don't let any come out of your mouth. And he goes on, he finishes the verse, and he says this, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. So Paul says, listen, when you want to say something nasty or life-draining or something that tears down, stop yourself. Just stop yourself in your tracks. It is not worth it. Instead, as your outline says, choose to speak life to the areas where people around you need it most. Choose to speak life to the areas where people around you need it most. Who are the people that God has placed in your life? Who are the people that you spend a lot of time with? What encouraging words do they need to hear from you? What do your friends or coworkers or employees need to hear from you? What does your husband or wife need to hear from you? What do your kids need to hear from you? Think of all the people that God has placed in your life that you interact with on a daily or weekly basis. Those are all people that God has entrusted you with. Where do they need to be built up? Where do they need to be encouraged? How can you speak life into their lives? Remember, in every encounter, we either give life or we drain it. There is no neutral exchange. So I want to challenge you, if you're an employer here, speak life into your employees' lives. Treat them how God would want you to treat them. Build them up, don't tear them down. If you're an employee, I challenge you to fill your lips with encouraging words for everyone around you. Compliment people. Tell your coworkers that you appreciate them. Be a light for Jesus by the way you encourage people in your workplace. Proverbs chapter 10, verse 11 says, the mouth of a good person is a deep, life-giving well. Be that person in your workplace. Be that person in your friend group. And be that person in your home. If you're a wife, you need to know that your husband needs your encouragement. He's longing for your words of affirmation. If you're always negative and always nagging, stop being so negative. Speak life into your husband's life. He needs to hear it from you. If you're a husband, your wife needs to hear how much you love her and how much you appreciate her. She doesn't need you to critique her all the time. She needs you to notice the little things. You know how I know that? Because that's what my wife told me, all right? That is a fact. She needs you to tell her that she's special. I was listening to the radio a number of years ago, and they brought in a relationship expert. And they asked the relationship expert, what's one thing that we can do to improve our marriage? And I'll never forget what she said. She said, husbands, turn to your wife. Turn off your phone. Turn off your iPad. Shut the TV. Put a muzzle in the dog. Put your baby in the crib. Okay, turn off all the distractions. And for 2 minutes, twice a day, turn to your wife and hug her. And just tell her that you love her. For 2 minutes, twice a day, that will change the dynamic of your relationship. So husbands, speak life to your wives. If you have kids, listen, this is unbelievably huge for kids. All you dads in the house, your kids, they need your approval. They need to know that you're proud of them. When's the last time you told your son or daughter that you're proud of them? Your words need to be life-giving and encouraging and approving. As dads, we need to tell our kids how much we love them and how special they are, not tear them down. Your words of encouragement can change your son or daughter's life. They need to hear it from you. Listen, I've been a youth pastor for 13 years, And I'm not even joking. Your kids, they need to hear that from you, parents, from moms and dads. They need to hear from you daily. Moms, your kids need to hear that you love them no matter what. They need to hear from you how much you care for them. Your kids need to know how precious they are to you. They need you to speak life into their lives. And this isn't something that happens once a month or even once a week. You can never fill your quota on how much you speak life into your kids. This should happen daily because honestly, your kids need it and they're longing for it. And I want to challenge you this morning. Maybe you're here and you've spoken words that have been tearing down, that have torn down your kids. Maybe you've drained life in a conversation or maybe a few conversations. I want to challenge you this morning. Before the sun goes down today, sit down with your son or your daughter and apologize to them. Tell them that you're sorry for the things that you said. Tell them that you're going to start right now to speak life and encourage. I challenge you to suck up your pride and ask for forgiveness and start building them up today. Your kids really do need that from you. All right, we're going to wrap up here. Today, this morning, we learned that our tongues, they're a powerful weapon that can do a lot of good and a lot of damage. We learned that in every encounter, we can either give life or we can drain it. There's no neutral exchange. And we learned that God has entrusted us with people in our lives that He wants us to speak life into. And this leads me to today's big idea. Every week at Broadway, we like to sum up the teaching in one statement, and here it is. The right word spoken at the right time can change a life. The right word spoken at the right time can change a life. So this morning, I challenge you to fill your conversations with life-giving, encouraging words. Be that person that builds others up, that empowers people, that speaks life in every encounter that you have. Let this be your lifestyle. In grade 8, my coach, he didn't even know that what he said to me impacted my life. That was just his lifestyle. That's just how he lived. And in that moment, he said the right thing, and the right words spoken at the right time did change my life. It was a turning point for me. So be a coworker that speaks life. Be a boss that speaks life. Be a friend that speaks life. Be a spouse that speaks life. And be a parent that speaks life, because the right word at the right time can change a life. Can I get an amen?